Okay. You're up, Judy.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're pleased to have you with us tonight for our moderator training, for the Candidate Forum moderator training. My name is Judy Florian. I am Vice President for Voter Services for the League of Women Voters of Michigan. I'd like to ask you to please all mute yourselves. And if you have any questions during the course of the presentation, please put them in the chat box and we will entertain those questions at the very end. I also want to, hang on, I'm trying to advance my screen here. Welcome our other two presenters, Paula Bowman, who is co-president of the League of Women Voters of Michigan, and Betsy Cushman, in charge of voter services for the Dearborn Heights League. We also had asked Rhonda Craig, who is the president of the Detroit League, to join us, but unfortunately she became ill and was unable to be with us tonight. So we wish her a very speedy recovery. Now, Forums, the league moderator, represents the organization to the candidates, speakers, media, and the public, and the moderator should always be mindful of the need to protect the league's image and integrity. Careful preparation and adherence to the league's nonpartisan policy and the ground rules of the forum are essential for a strong moderator and successful candidate forum. The key is that all candidates have an equal opportunity to participate and that this opportunity is provided in a nonpartisan manner. So I'd like to ask you each.
Could Judy?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Christina wrote and asked if people could put their local league down by their name.
Oh yeah, if you want to rename yourself and indicate your local league, that would be great. Okay, my first question is, how many of you have attended a candidate forum either in person or virtually? Raise your hands. Okay, how many of you have participated as a volunteer at a candidate forum, either in person or virtually? Okay, planning a forum can vary by league. Each league has its own traditions and structures related to candidate forums. There are no hard and fast rules on how this is done. Some may have a committee, perhaps a voter services committee, that is responsible for setting up the candidate forums. Others have a producer who plans the forum and selects the moderator. Others could have the moderator take care of all the responsibilities of the forum. The league president typically likes to have some type of a role, either with opening remarks or an official welcome to the forum. And this is always where they can always plug membership and talk about what the league and their mission is all about. But regardless of what structure you have, here are some of the things you should know about setting up forums in general. First of all, you need to schedule it. And when you schedule it, you can either select a series of dates and approach the candidates about those dates to see which works for them, or you can just select a date and the candidates 9 times out of 10 can find a way to rearrange their schedule to be there. The producer or moderator, who's ever in charge of the forum, handles all the logistics, setting up a location, making sure that there's the appropriate audio technical equipment, inviting the candidates themselves, selecting a moderator who is trained to moderate. Also, you need to select a timekeeper. You need to make sure you have people that can sort questions to make sure that there are no slanderous or inappropriate or duplicate questions. And if you're having an in-person forum, you also want to make sure you have greeters that can greet the public and the candidates when they're coming in. Another thing about planning the forum is how to handle the questions. Will they be collected from the public, submitted ahead of time? Will they be in a virtual forum, entered into the chat or Q&A? Those are the things you have to decide up front. Also, you need to be able to write a forum script and establish ground rules. Now, when you're looking at a forum script, the script really can be prepared by the moderator or the producer of the forum. And it typically includes the outline of the format and the ground rules, introducing league members who are assisting with the forum, explain the process for submitting questions, and remind the audience of their expected conduct, as well as some type of a closing statement. The ground rules need to be established and set up and sent to the candidates ahead of time. And the ground rules can include things such as you can't have visible campaign materials while you're in the forum. You need to make sure you understand what the moderator is in charge of. Anything related to the forum as it relates to questions, the question time limits and things like that need to be shared with the candidates in advance. And some leagues also will have the candidates sign some type of a waiver as it relates to the recording of the forum. And they cannot they can use the video recording, at least in our league, we let them do that, but they cannot edit the recording in any way. They have to use it, and they have to agree to that ahead of time. Also, if you're going to have an in-person forum, you need to make sure you schedule a videographer if one is needed. The other can involve anything from maybe setting up some partners if you want to have someone help you co-sponsor the forum. So now I'm going to turn it over to Paula.
Thanks, Judy. So right off the bat, we're going to address the fact that we've all been dealing with Zoom forums the last year and a half, and we thought that it was a good idea to weigh the pros and cons. First of all, the pros. No question, it is cheaper. We all saved money in the past years. Nobody had to spend any money on venue reservations, refreshments, anything that you do supply at an in-person forum. And for my league especially, we were not paying a videographer $150 a pop. So that's important. We've also discovered, especially during the really deep part of the pandemic where nobody was going anywhere, that candidates were all available at any time we chose. Nobody ever had any conflicts. And we're still finding that that's the case. People can be out of town and still participate in a Zoom forum. So it is handy, just like this tonight. 5 years ago, we never would have done this. We would have tried to have some kind of a regional workshop for this kind of an event. And here we are on Zoom with little fanfare and little expense. The other pro is that it doesn't require as many volunteers to assist. You basically have the moderator, the producer who has done the prep work, and a timer. And sometimes the timer is the producer. So rarely are there more than 3 people engaged in this process. You don't have to supply food, snacks. In our case, we just supply water. But, you know, we had to have the cups, we had to have clean pitchers. Nobody has to lug those sacks of supplies to the forum. As I said earlier, too, it's easier to agree on a date. When you're doing an in-person forum, you have 3 key things: finding a venue, booking the videographer, and booking the moderator. And I don't know how many times we've all gone back and forth trying to get those 3 stars aligned before we even invited the candidates. Also, if Zoom works, and let's face it, we've all gotten to be experts at this, you really don't have audio or video snafus. In my league over the last 10 years, we had one key forum where we got all done and found out the audio was not decipherable. In another one, the video was gone. So with the Zoom, it's pretty foolproof once you get the Zoom technology down. There are some cons though. There's no question that a Zoom forum is not as exciting for candidates. You really miss out on the reactions that you would see if they were all sitting up on stage, body language, and sometimes that makes a difference and helps people make a decision. Oops.
Sorry.
You zipped ahead.
Sorry.
That's all right. I also wanted to mention that press coverage is harder to come by. it's really tough to get reporters to come to a Zoom meeting. Sometimes, yes, they'll watch the recording later, but it's just been difficult, at least in our league, to get the word out that there is a forum going on and it is available for the public to see. When you have an in-person one and you're inviting the public, it's much easier to get people excited about it in advance. The lack of a live audience, even though we always tell people, hold your applause, try not to show any reactions, that's important too. That really provides some energy for a forum and gives it that extra boost of excitement in terms of getting people excited about the upcoming election. Depending on what you're doing with a Zoom forum, it is tough to get questions. In our league, we submit this in advance on Facebook, or we tell people in advance about this and say, please, submit your questions. We rarely get more than 1 or 2 questions. So the voter service team is kind of putting together those questions at the last minute, and that's okay. It's just that when you get participation from the audience on the spot at a live forum, it's a little bit more pertinent and relative to the campaigns and the election itself. And this last item, even though I had used this as a pro, that not as many league members have to be involved, to us, it's also a con too, because this is having people come to a candidate forum, volunteers, is one of the easiest ways to get new members engaged. They come to an in-person forum, they can be the timer or the question collector, and eventually the question screener, but they can really see what the league does, how important it is, and how valued the league is to the candidates as well as the audience. So this past year and a half, we really have missed this, getting other people involved, and we've just kind of depended on the same 2 or 3 or 4 people to handle our forums because we wanted to do it as efficiently as possible. But we missed getting members involved, especially new members. Okay, I'm turning the next part over to Betsy.
Okay, Betsy.
Thank you. There was another pro and another con given in the chat, so I won't go into those, but there's a lot more that can be said. So let me just talk about the qualities of a forum moderator. And the first one, as you might know, is to be well prepared ahead of time. So if you are new to this, it's really helpful to look at different leagues and different moderators that have done what you can actually often do. Either go on Vote 411 and look for somebody that's doing it now, or even Googling can sometimes bring that up. Because people have different styles and leagues have different styles and traditions in your leagues, or you're a new league and you're setting the new traditions as you do it. Beforehand, you want to review the list of names, and so that you'll check later to see how to pronounce it, but just make sure that you have a list so you know how many people are going to be, keep in touch with the producer of the forum. And you want to also make sure that you have a copy. I would always try to send the moderator a copy of the invitation that went to the candidates so they know ahead of time what they were asked, and also what the rules or guidelines are, so they know right from the beginning what they were told. So then the schedule ahead of time of how many minutes the opening statement is, the closing statement, how much time to answer questions. And then when you come to the forum, please come 30 minutes at least early beforehand, because there's nothing that upsets a producer more than not having your moderator come until the last minute. There's really things that the moderator needs to do ahead of time. So come at least 30 minutes ahead of time. Of course, you're representing the league, so you're dressing and acting professionally at all times. You're probably going to be on camera. If you're doing Zoom, you're going to be on camera, but you might have, if you're in person, there might be a picture, whatever you want to look appropriate. I was just interviewed for something last week and they told me to wear jewel tones in my clothing, but I don't think you can tell. I'm still wearing a supposed jewel tone, but anyway, the confidence, it really helps that you are going to be in charge of the forum and your decision is going to be on every aspect of them. Once it gets going, you're going to be in charge. So you want to make sure that you feel comfortable, that you, of showing that confidence, you're being very decisive in your decision-making on the spot, because you really need to. You have to make split-second decisions while the forum is going. So you need to make sure you're feeling really comfortable with the rules. You know exactly if somebody's breaking the rules, you can stop right away. It also helps, however, to have a sense of humor. You don't need to be somber about it. And the candidates are often new, and even if they're not new, they're sometimes very nervous themselves. So it's really helpful to put them at ease just being really good-natured about how things go, because things are going to go wrong sometimes. Almost always some little thing is going to go wrong. And so you just need to keep your sense of humor about it, smiling, and you might make the mistake, or somebody might, you just keep good-natured about it. You just keep going. And then, of course, you can't accept to be the moderator if you are supporting one of the candidates that's in that race. So you really have to be politically neutral and not a supporter or opposer of any candidate that's involved. And it's really helpful. We try to have someone in the Dearborn Heights League, someone who's either not from either area, or if it's a Dearborn forum, have someone from Dearborn Heights moderate. And if it's Dearborn Heights, have someone from Dearborn moderate. Try to keep it so that they're not known, to be supporting. And some leagues really make it a point to never have someone from their own city do it, but every league is different, and you have the ability to make the decision of what's right for your league and for that particular forum. Sometimes when it's a really hot race, it really helps to have an outside moderator, always a league person. And then it really helps. The last one is like good coping skills, which I'm still working on. Be prepared for the unexpected and keep calm. The microphones fail, the power goes out, audience says they can't hear, you just keep calm and keep coping with whatever it is that's going on. So I think then if we can move on to the next one of the moderator's responsibilities, that timing, again, you need to know what the rules are ahead of time so that you can yourself be prompt. You know what time it's supposed to start, the forum is scheduled for. You know what time it's supposed to end. You know how long their opening statements are and their closing statements are, etc. And for the questions. It really helps, we'll be going into that more, but it helps to write down those times so that you don't have any question while you're at the podium, you're taking care of it all. Explain the purpose of the event to the audiences, and this could be the league president might be the one that starts, that just says this is a public service. It could be, it could be the producer, or it could be the moderator. We in Dearborn, we have done both having, if we had a lot of candidates and thought we could only take so much time, we've actually had the moderator do the beginning and the closing and do the whole thing. We have also had, normally if we can, have the president or the producer, whatever works for your league, make a few statements that really welcomes people and explains the purpose. It's so that voters can make an educated, informed decision when they vote. So we use words like public service. Sorry. So we use words like that, and volunteer, that we're an organization of volunteers. We're doing this because we really want all of our community to have an opportunity to know who the candidates are and who best represents their views. And get always saying, never support or oppose. And then you have to, your really main role is to make sure that there's fair and equal opportunity for every candidate, that they have the same amount of time. So beforehand, you meet with the candidates. Usually you ask them to come 15 minutes before the forum starts. That way you can check the pronunciation of the names. And sometimes if it's difficult, you might ask if somebody ahead of time knows how to pronounce the names, so that you have that a little bit of time ahead of time to really think through how you pronounce the names. And then what order they're going to follow, those are that, whether you draw lots, we have a deck of cards, or whether you just decide ahead of time it's going to be alphabetical order, whatever. And then making sure you never show a favoritism. So if you let one candidate finish a sentence when the stop goes up, then you have to let every candidate finish a sentence when that happens. And then one last thing is that we don't address candidates by their titles. So it's always, Mr. or Ms. We don't address them. We don't recognize incumbents. They can say that in their own words if they want to. And I think this is going on to Judy or Paula.
Actually, it's me, and I'm just going to do this first bullet, and Judy's going to take this screen down, because what we're going to show are samples of two grids. Hold on a second, let me find this. These are the grids, or every moderator has to be in charge of a grid. We listing the candidates' names and checking off when they've made their opening statement, responded to certain questions, because believe me, you will lose track. Every moderator has a different way of doing this. Every moderator has a different method. We had one moderator, still have one moderator in our league, who is so confident. She usually asks for just one of the index cards that we use to ask questions, and she jots everything down on the index card. And it drives me crazy when I've been the producer, but she does keep track. So whatever works for you. But this is the grid. This is actually Rhonda Craig's grid that she uses in the Detroit League. You'll notice all this is empty, and that's because you usually don't know what order the candidates are going to be sitting or responding until you draw those lots, usually right before the forum starts. We have done this on Zoom by holding you can sit there and hold a bucket and pull numbers out of a hat. It's never been a problem. As Betsy said, some leagues use cards. In our league, we use poker chips in a Crown Royal felt bag, which I always think is a wonderful oxymoron to the straight-laced league, but it's amazing how few candidates even pick up on it. So it's worked for us for many years. I also want to mention too that You may have candidate one give the opening statement, and then the first question begins with candidate two, and then the closing statements, most leagues that I've worked with tend to reverse it. So if there's 5 candidates and the closing statement, you give candidate number 5 the right to make the closing statement first. However, I've had other people say, well, that's not really fair, because when you give candidate number 5 the opening statement, wouldn't it be, or the closing statement first, wouldn't it be better for him to have the last word, since he was the last one to give an opening statement? So totally up to you. Nothing's right or wrong. You guys make the decision and decide what you want to do, or frankly, what's the easiest to keep track of. So this is one grid. Now I'm going to pull up the one. Oh, hold on. Sorry. I'm going to pull up one that Grosse Pointe uses, which is a little bit different. You see, it's nice and shaded. Right here, they've got times already spelled out. I figure the script's going to take 8 minutes. Opening statements are going to take 8 minutes. Probably I see there's 4 candidates, which means that every candidate had a 2-minute opening statement. They have figured out what the questions, how much time that will be, and so on. That helps to have that, because as the moderator, you usually don't have anyone nudging you saying 10 minutes left or only 5 minutes to go, and you've got 8 closing statements to go. Oh no, we're in trouble. So keeping track of time is an important thing for you to do. As I said, use any system you want. If you would like copies of these 2 grids, we'd be happy to send them to you. So just put your name in the chat and ask us to send them. In fact, maybe we'll do that automatically, Judy, when we send out the recording. We'll go ahead and do that. But whatever works for you. I used to use frankly, a piece of graph paper. I had a pad of graph paper that I brought with me every time. Now I'm a little more formal, but whatever works for you, just make sure you're prepared and be consistent. Judy, I'll let you go from here.
Okay, am I unmuted? I think I am. Okay, great. Thanks, Paula. So as Paula said, you've got this question grid to keep track of what you're doing. And you as the moderator, your main purpose is to pose the questions and elicit responses from the candidates. You're also responsible for maintaining order, and it's your ultimate decision maker on which questions are going to be asked. It's interesting because a lot of candidates, if you have a lot of candidates in your forum, you might want to repeat the question every so often because they may not have been paying attention, or they may be thinking about how they want to respond. So I always make sure that, especially if it's a long question, that you repeat it so they're sure of what they're responding to. Also, you are the ultimate enforcer of the time. So you need to make sure that you manage the time appropriately. And as Paula said, you know how many questions? Most leagues will have 2-minute opening, 2-minute closing, and a 1-minute question response. Sometimes if there's a question posed to a specific candidate, in the Grosse Pointe League, we will give that specific candidate 90 minutes to respond, but then we will also give the other candidates a 1-minute response to the same question. So they do have the option to jump in and respond to a candidate-specific question if they want to. It's sometimes also easy just to start out with a general question, like, why do you think you're qualified for this position? Or why are you running for this position? But most of the candidates will probably cover that in their opening statement at the very beginning. The moderator has the sole authority to interrupt the proceedings to enforce the guidelines in the format. If you find that things are getting out of control, there's a lot of talking and chattering going on in the audience, or we have people that haven't muted their microphones in a virtual forum, You as the moderator need to take control of that, and you have every right to interrupt and get things back on track. You also need to refrain from placing judgment. You really can't control how the candidate is going to respond to a question. The candidate may not even answer the question, but you don't make that judgment because the candidate can say whatever they want within their 1 minute time frame. However, they cannot make negative comments to any of the other candidates. So we need to make sure that that is observed. Another key point is being alert to the timekeeper. In an in-person forum, you need to make sure that physically you are located relatively close to the timekeeper. And you can see the timekeeper, you can see the paddles in terms of the warnings for 30 seconds and stop and things like that. Sometimes just holding up a paddle with the word stop may not be sufficient. Sometimes the timekeeper is going to have to be verbally say stop. And sometimes you as the moderator, if the candidate continues talking, then you must end their discussion at that point. So the timekeeper is very important. And it's also important that you have a timekeeper that is experienced. So we kind of have a buddy system in the Grosse Pointe League where we will have a experienced timekeeper and an inexperienced timekeeper, and the inexperienced person will sit with the person who has done it before that night of the forum so they can get an idea of how that's handled. And it has worked out very well. So Paula, on that note, speaking of keeping the forum in control,
these are the problems that we all try to anticipate, and so that we know how we're going to solve them. So what do you do when the speaker keeps talking when time is up? It is amazing that some people are very tuned in to the timer, the paddle, or the card, and they immediately stop mid-sentence. Others either don't see it or pretend not to see it or keep talking so fast. When I'm the moderator, if they are continuing to talk, I just keep saying, thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Mr. Smith. It's time to stop, so that my voice is the one that people are hearing, not his rambling on and on. Eventually they get it, but it is a chronic problem. And as Judy said, you and the timer should work out who's going to say stop. Sometimes it's better if the moderator says it, if it's a big room and the timekeeper doesn't have a mic, but that's something that you should work out with the timekeeper. Whatever you're comfortable with, you as the moderator should make that decision. What happens when a candidate becomes rude? You know, in all the years that I've been moderating, this has not happened a lot. Most candidates are so grateful for the opportunity. They're also nervous and a little bit scared. But every once in a while, you do get someone, and the rudeness usually is because they start slamming another candidate. And that is when you have to say, Mr. Smith, please restrict your comments to what you are going to do in this office instead of criticizing what another person is going to do. If they continue to do it after a second warning, you're going to have to say, I'm sorry, we need to move on because we are not going to allow you to answer this question. Frankly, the candidate is usually so embarrassed by that point that they do behave further on. If you have an audience that applauds or becomes unruly, first of all, right at the beginning, before you start rolling the tape, you want to let the audience know to do things like turn off their cell phones, but you also want to say, please do not give any reactions to this. It not only does it take away from the time the candidates have to speak, but it also exerts undue influence on those watching it at home. My best way to get people to shut up is to say, you're taking time away from the candidate. Would you please stop this? And in most of the candidate instructions, at least in our league, and I know in Dearborn's and in Grosse Point's, when we send them out, it does indicate there about audience behavior, you know, that they can't wear t-shirts or hats with your name on it, and that we are depending on the candidates to deliver this message to their supporters. If someone challenges the way the forum is run, we all have had this happen, and we simply indicate that we are a nonpartisan public service organization. We are not getting paid to do this. The candidates have agreed to participate of their own free will, and we're sorry that somebody doesn't like the way it's run, but if their group is welcome to hold another forum with different rules, that usually shuts them up. A lot of times people think we get paid to be league members. I'm sure you've all had this. They think we get paid to register voters, have candidate forums. People need to know that we are doing this as a public service and that we are nonpartisan. If you keep saying that over and over again, they usually get the hint. If you have questions that all deal with the same issues, that's a problem. And that is something that your question screener should be working on. Even if the question screener has to take some of those questions and rephrase them slightly. But if I know when we have candidate forums, multiple questions on the same issue, if it's been asked and been answered, we don't even ask that second and third and fourth question. We just move on to something different.
You're muted.
I know. And of course,
Okay, that was your
my
phone.
husband and I are both on the Zoom calls. So after 4 rings, it will stop. What happens if you run out of questions? This does happen, and you end the forum. If you have no more questions and the prepared questions that you brought, just in case you run out of questions, if you run out of those too, so big deal. You end the forum 15 minutes early, everybody gets to go home that much earlier. But that is another reason why you should have some prepared questions in your pocket with you in case you only have family members coming to a candidate forum and you just can't depend on those to ask always nonpartisan questions. What happens if you have people in the audience demanding to take written questions with them? Sometimes we get this request from the press who wants to go back and see what questions were asked, but other times we do have audience members wanting the questions because they want to see if we have altered the question they asked. And the simple answer is, nope, these are property of the league. We keep them for in our archives just in case we need them in the future. If you want a list of the questions, if they really push you for this, you can offer to give them a list of the questions in the next couple of days. I know we've done this for the press a few times, but you know, if you don't have to do that, don't volunteer unless they really press you, because it's extra work for you. And you have to go back and try to remember what was number 1, 2, 3, and 4, even though the moderator may label those, the producer who is looking at those after the fact may not have that same sense of what came first or second. And the last one I wanted to mention, which isn't on here, and Betsy mentioned this just a little bit, what happens if you have a candidate with a difficult last name and they humbly say, just call me John instead of John Krasinski, or just call me Mr. K or something like that? You really should politely decline and respectfully say, we really want to call you by your last name, just using Mr. or Ms. It's awkward 3/4 of the way into the forum if you're calling everybody Mr. and Miss, and you're calling this guy John. the optics aren't good and it almost looks disrespectful. So we would advise you not to do that. I'm going to turn this over to Betsy now, who's going to go through some of the questions that have come up in the chat.
Paula, I just want to add one other thing before Betsy goes there.
Yep.
One of the things you need to realize too is you cannot have a candidate forum with only one candidate. You have to have at least 2 candidates in a field of 3 or more people. And the candidates cannot send a substitute. If they have a conflict and they want to send someone else to speak on their behalf, they cannot do that. We actually have had candidates who, because of a conflict they could not change, ask if they could submit a written statement, which we allowed them to do, and the moderator would read that written statement during the opening remarks of the forum. So we've allowed them to do that, but you have to really make sure that you have at least 2 people at that forum to conduct it. So
That's true.
That's the kind of thing that would be covered in the producer part of setting up a candidate forum. But Judy is absolutely right. You're never going to have a forum with only one person. Sorry, Betsy, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. Let me go on to some of the questions. One is, what is the obligation to reschedule if there is a candidate who cannot attend?
well, I'll speak from the Grosse Pointe League's perspective. We will not reschedule. We will take, if the majority of the candidates can be there, we keep that time, because what happens is you get into I can't come that date if we change it. And so it gets way too confusing, and we solidify the date. If they can make it, fine. And honestly, I have found that they are more than willing to change their schedule if they want to have this public forum, for their candidacy. So that's been our experience.
And usually a producer will go online if one of these candidates is, say, a school board member and they're running for state rep. Week the school board meetings are, so you don't schedule it for that date. We've gone and tried to look at city calendars, township calendars, to avoid any conflicts, so that when we do send that date out, we're pretty confident that they should be open for it.
We typically pick a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Most of our council meetings are on Monday nights. We never pick a Friday because that's the weekend. So a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are your safe, I feel your safe days in terms of
Yeah, and it
scheduling.
really depends on the office because of, as you say, the school boards, and they have theirs at all at different times, and we have like 5 school boards. So, the next question was actually not a question. It was one saying that they have a moderator plus an assistant, and the assistant keeps track of the candidates in question, so the moderator can focus on the questions. So it works for them. People have different things that they've tried. And I think you've mentioned that you're going to mail out like sample guidelines and, sample invitations, because those are, because I think those are really helpful to see what some other leagues have done. Then there's one about, are all questions submitted in advance? And I'll answer part of that is that because I've been involved in a lot of forums as have the other presenters. And every situation can be different, so that in this, like in our last one that we've had for mayoral candidates for Dearborn and Dearborn Heights, we wanted to have all the questions submitted in advance, and we actually had good luck getting a lot of questions from the community. So, and then we met and we organized them in kind of a priority, and Paula Bowman did a wonderful job of asking the question. We had a few that we wanted to make sure were asked that we thought were really important community questions that many people had asked about. So we were following by what the community was saying. And then we let the moderator actually kind of decide as the forum time goes on. But questions, we've had questions submitted, and then a sorting committee when we did in-person forums. And you can do questions through Zoom format, but it's really good to have that go to the hosts, only those people, so it's not that everybody sees the question, because a very inappropriate question could be asked, or a very biased question could be asked if it's chat for everybody. So you want the chat to go to be limited. It is a safer environment because you can really get people asking crazy questions and making their statements all in the chat.
Right.
So
In a virtual forum, I've had it work a couple different ways. At Grosse Pointe, we've done closed forums, so the public is not invited, but we've given them the opportunity through our publicity to submit questions to us that have to be in the day before the forum date. And then a group of people, the question sorters, get together and look those over and determine which ones are going to be asked. I participated in one Monday night, the mayor of Hamtramck, and that was an open forum. So the people that were attending could actually submit their questions in the chat box. And they had 3 people, I think, that were reviewing those questions for appropriateness and duplication. And then they would send those to me in the chat box, and then I could ask them from there. So it can work either way. For in-person forums, we usually it's the people that are there that get to ask the questions. We have never really had people send us questions in advance because they can't attend. But again, it just depends on the type of forum that you're going to have, whether it's open or closed.
thank you. Well, Jen Oliver wrote about the questions of being asked for questions, is that you could put them, once they've been asked, you could put them in the chat box. Somebody could do that if it's Zoom. Then there was a question. I thought candidate specific questions were not allowed and no rebuttals.
I'll take that one. This is totally up to your league, how you're going to do it. It may be very difficult to have candidate specific questions when you have a whole lot of candidates. I did hear Judy say that in the Grosse Pointe League, they do address that. Frankly, in our league, we don't. If we get a question for candidate A, we modify it, the question screener does, so that all of them can answer it. For instance, we had one guy running for school board whose kids all went to private school. And the question was, Mr. Smith, how can you be an effective public school board member when your kids all go to private school?
Mm-hmm.
Change the question to say, do you believe that a school board member's children should all attend public schools, or is it okay that they attend other schools? Something like that. It was nicer the way we did it, but that's what we do. But Judy, you say that in your league, you do allow for candidate specific questions.
We do if they're pretty generic in nature, but what has typically happened is we get a question aimed at a specific candidate, and that question is trying to put that candidate on the spot. And our question, that's why you have to have really experienced question sorters, so that in screening the questions, because we will not ask those, because it's not fair to put that candidate on the spot. So those are automatically dumped out and eliminated.
And
Yes,
one of the things that Betsy said earlier was that the moderator has to have good judgment. If you get one of those questions from a question screener and you are thinking, oh my God, this is crossing the line a little bit, throw it out. You are the one that is going to have to answer to it. So your judgment is the final say. If you feel it's inappropriate, dump it.
Right. Whenever in doubt, don't ask it.
Okay, I think that handles the questions. Someone made a suggestion that if somebody wants a list of questions, couldn't you just tell them to watch the recording?
Yeah.
And someone else did ask for all the grids that you showed to be mailed out, and to circulate the slides. as well. And I think the others are pros and cons of having a virtual versus an in-person forum. So
I think it's a good idea before you even think about doing your first forum as a moderator, that you go to a forum and observe several forums, whether they're virtual or in person, and watch the moderator and get a sense of what the moderator is doing, because I think that will make you feel more confident of what your responsibilities are. And sometimes standing in front of the mirror, believe it or not, and practicing is the best way to learn, I think. Don't be afraid to rehearse, because that's, I think, what can give you the confidence to do what you want to do.
I just found two more new questions. One is that,
Okay.
What do you do if a member of the audience charges the candidates and yells to one that they are a liar for an in-person forum?
Wow.
That's a good one. Well, you would like to think in an in-person forum, I hate to say it, but is there going to be security around? In this day and age, do we have to rely on security to be at our forums? I would hope not. But
in the past, I have made arrangements for when I knew that there were some hot-headed candidates
to have security there.
And so, yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Right.
I have never had that happen.
Yes,
and
I haven't either.
We're not going with security at our league.
Well, what we had it was at City Hall, and we had the police department there, and they knew this particular candidate,
right.
And so everything was fine.
Right.
So, but we were prepared because he'd been threatening things. And then someone mentions that the Observer Corps members are a good source of questions for sorters, and they are well aware of local issues, which I think is a really good point. And then Jen Oliver mentions we have used Google Forms to let community members submit questions anonymously ahead of the forum. The link to the forum is shared with all members and on social media, and then can be passed on through the community. So, and that's where we've gotten a lot of answers, a lot of questions.
We have used Google Forms with the Grosse Pointe League too. And the nice thing about that is we include on that where they heard of, are they aware of the league, where they've heard about the league, are they interested in information about the league, would they like membership information. So we've actually been able to recruit members by using the Google Forms to solicit questions. So it can have a two-pronged purpose if you set it up that way.
One thing we did not mention too is a candidate participation policy. And again, this is something that your producer would take into account, but every league should have a candidate participation policy, because, and what that usually says is that you're inviting any candidate who is going to be on the ballot or whose votes will be counted. And that second part means that if somebody is a certified write-in candidate and their votes will be counted, you can invite them to the forum. We have done that because that sometimes is the only opportunity that write-in candidate has to be heard. And we have had pretty significant pushback from the existing candidates who have registered in time. And it was helpful for us to say, you know what, we have a candidate participation policy. In fact, I think that night I had even brought it with me because I knew that there would be an issue, but every league should have that, just so you can prove that you have thought about this ahead of time. It's not a spur of the moment decision. And the plan was always that we would give candidates whose votes are going to be counted a voice in the democratic process.
Right. And you can provide that for us too, Paula, that we can send out to the group.
This is going to be quite a package that we're sending.
It's going to be quite a package of information. Well, we want you to have as many resources as possible.
Right.
And as I said, we have put our contact information in the chat. So if you have any, our email, so if you have any questions, Paula is recording this and she's going to put it on the League of Women Voters Michigan's YouTube channel. We will send you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation we used tonight, some sample ground rules and forum scripts. And again, as you continue to embark on your moderator journey, we hope that you will contact us and not be afraid to ask any questions you might have. So with that, anything else? Any last minute? Okay, I want to thank Betsy and Paula for their presentations tonight, and I thank all of you for your interest. We're going to have a new crop of moderators for the local league. So thank you so much for being with us.